I faced a lifetime of favoritism toward my golden child sister. But on my wedding day, I finally got the sweet revenge I deserved. Growing up in my house, there was no competition. Vanessa was always going to win. My parents didn't just favor her, they idolized her. She wasn't just their firstborn. She was their golden child, the center of their universe. No matter what I did, it could never compare. When Vanessa got an A on a test, my parents would clap and tell her she was destined for greatness. When I brought home straight A's, "Good job, sweetie," they'd say, barely looking up from their newspapers. One year, Vanessa painted a sloppy watercolor picture for a school art show. My parents framed it and hung it in the living room like it belonged in the Louvre. When I won first place in the regional science fair, they stuck the ribbon in a drawer and forgot about it. It wasn't just neglect, it was active sabotage. Vanessa knew how to weaponize their favoritism, and she did it with precision. If we argued, and we often did, she'd twist the story, so she looked like the victim. "Mom, she took my necklace," she'd wail, even though I hadn't gone near her stuff. Without fail, my mom would march in, confiscate something of mine as punishment, and scold me for being selfish. The worst incident happened when I was 10. Vanessa had a meltdown because she'd broken Mom's favorite vase during one of her tantrums. Before I could even process what had happened, she turned to me with crocodile tears and shouted, "Why did you push me, you jerk?" My parents rushed in and didn't even ask for my side of the story. The punishment? Grounded for 2 weeks, no TV, no books, no bike rides. Vanessa got a hug and reassurance that accidents happen. By the time we hit our teenage years, the dynamic hadn't just solidified, it had evolved into something toxic. Vanessa's jealousy was no longer confined to the household. If I made a new friend, she'd swoop in and charm them away. Once, I invited a girl from school over to hang out, and by the end of the evening, Vanessa had convinced her to join a club they'd invented together, one I wasn't welcome in. Vanessa also loved spreading rumors about me at school. "Did you hear she cheats on tests?" she whispered to one group. "I think she's jealous of me," she told another. It didn't take long before my social circle became a minefield. People didn't trust me, or worse, they thought I was some kind of desperate loner clinging to Vanessa's popularity. One particular incident stands out. A classmate invited me to a birthday party, and I was genuinely excited for once. When Vanessa found out, she threw a tantrum because she wasn't invited. "It's not fair," she whined to our parents. "If I can't go, she shouldn't go either." I'll never forget the look on my mom's face when she called me into the kitchen later that night. "We've decided you're not going to the party," she said. "We need to be fair to Vanessa. She'd be so hurt if you went without her." It wasn't enough for Vanessa to have everything handed to her. She wanted to take what little I had, too. But I wasn't going to let them win. While Vanessa coasted through high school on her popularity and my parents' coddling, I poured myself into academics. I stayed up late studying, joined clubs, and worked hard to build a resume that would get me out of that house for good. The day I got my college acceptance letter felt like breaking out of a prison. I'd earned a full scholarship, far away from my family, and I didn't plan on looking back. My parents barely acknowledged the accomplishment. Vanessa, of course, rolled her eyes and muttered something about how nerds always get the easy way out. I didn't care. I was finally free, or so I thought. What I didn't realize then was that Vanessa and my parents weren't going to let me go so easily. Their grip on my life wasn't loosening. They were just waiting for the next opportunity to pull me back. The first weeks of college felt like stepping into a new world, one where my every move wasn't scrutinized or overshadowed by Vanessa. For the first time, I could breathe. I made friends who appreciated me for who I was, not for how useful I could be in their schemes or how much I could elevate their social status. I joined study groups, attended events, and discovered hobbies I'd never had the freedom to explore before. It felt like I was finally building a life that was mine and mine alone. At first, I tried to stay in touch with my family out of a sense of obligation. Weekly calls with my mom, quick updates to my dad, and the occasional text exchange with Vanessa. But it didn't take long for their old patterns to creep back in. My mom's calls always circled back to Vanessa, her struggles, her potential, and, of course, how hard it was for my parents to watch her flounder. They barely asked about me. If I mentioned an achievement, acing an exam, making the dean's list, it was met with lukewarm indifference. By sophomore year, I stopped going home for breaks unless I absolutely had to. When I did, it was unbearable. Vanessa had flunked out of college after a year and was back home, claiming she just needed time to figure things out. My parents treated her like a fragile porcelain doll, tiptoeing around her tantrums and excusing her lack of ambition. She's under so much pressure, my mom would sigh, as if Vanessa had been saddled with the weight of the world instead of a minor inconvenience. The worst part was the way they looked at me, like my independence was a threat. "You're so busy these days," my dad said during one visit, his tone dripping with judgment. "Vanessa misses you. She could really use your support right now." Support? Vanessa had never supported me a day in her life. It was during this period of growing distance from my family that I met Mark. He was everything Vanessa wasn't: kind, grounded, and genuinely interested in my well-being. We met in a political science seminar, where he was quick to challenge the professor in a way that was bold, without being arrogant. I was intrigued from the start. Our relationship grew quickly, and before I knew it, we were inseparable. Mark was the first person who made me feel truly seen. He listened to my stories about Vanessa and my parents with a mix of disbelief and anger. "You don't owe them anything," he told me one night after I shared yet another tale of my family's favoritism. "You've built this amazing life without their help. Don't let them drag you back into their mess." When Mark proposed during my final year of college, it felt like a dream. He planned it perfectly, a quiet picnic in a park, just the two of us. He knew I didn't need anything flashy, I just wanted something real. Breaking the news to my parents, however, was a different story. "Engaged already?" my mom said, her voice laced with concern. "Don't you think it's a bit soon?" Vanessa, of course, had her own take. "Wow, I guess nerds really do get lucky sometimes," she said with a smirk. "Good for you, I guess." I brushed off their reactions, determined not to let them ruin my happiness. But as wedding planning began, my parents' true colors came out. At first, it was small things, insisting on a certain venue, questioning our guest list. But then Vanessa started inserting herself into the process, and everything spiraled out of control. It started with her volunteering to help with the planning. "I have great taste," she said breezily, as if that settled the matter. I reluctantly agreed, hoping it might smooth things over with my parents. But Vanessa being helpful quickly turned into Vanessa making demands. She wanted a special role in the ceremony. She wanted input on my dress. She even hinted that her boyfriend, whom I'd met exactly once, should be part of the wedding party. Mark saw the stress on my face and pulled me aside one night. "What's really going on here?" he asked. "They're trying to make this about Vanessa," I admitted, tears of frustration welling up in my eyes. "It's like I can't have a single moment that's just mine." Mark took my hand, his expression serious. "We're not letting them ruin this. Whatever it takes, we'll make sure this wedding is about us, not them." I didn't know then just how much we'd have to fight to make that promise a reality. The day Mark proposed felt like something out of a dream. We were at the park near campus, a quiet place we'd often gone during our time together. The sun was shining, and the sound of birds chirping blended perfectly with the soft rustle of leaves. Mark seemed nervous, which was unusual for him. As we walked along the path, he suddenly stopped, turned to me, and dropped to one knee. "I've never met anyone like you," he began, his voice steady, but his hands slightly trembling. "You're strong, brilliant, and kind. I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I want to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. Will you marry me?" I could barely speak as I nodded, tears streaming down my face. The ring was simple and elegant, exactly my style. It wasn't flashy, but it was perfect. In that moment, nothing else mattered. It was just the two of us starting our future together. Breaking the news to my family, however, was like stepping into another reality. I called my mom later that evening, still floating on a cloud of happiness. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright. "Hi, sweetheart. What's new?" "Mark proposed," I said, practically bursting with excitement. There was a pause. Then, instead of the congratulations I expected, my mom said, "Oh, Vanessa will be so excited to hear this." I blinked, confused. "Vanessa?" "Yes, your sister must be thrilled for you," my mom gushed. "She's always been so invested in your love life." "Isn't that sweet?" I bit back a groan. Vanessa hadn't mentioned my love life in years, unless it was to make snide comments about Mark being too nice or a bit boring, but I let it go, determined not to let my mom's misplaced focus ruin my mood. When Vanessa heard the news, her reaction was lukewarm at best. "Oh, wow," she said with a tight smile. "I guess it's nice. I mean, good for you." I could feel the insult coming before she even said it. "You're the first one to get married in the family, but it's not like anyone expected me to get married first anyway." There it was, a jab at her own perceived superiority, hidden behind faux encouragement. I forced a smile and changed the subject. She wasn't going to ruin this for me. As Mark and I started planning the wedding, Vanessa's behavior grew more passive-aggressive by the day. She made comments about my dress choices, saying things like, "Don't you think something more dramatic would suit you better?" She questioned every decision, from the venue to the guest list, as if her approval mattered. My parents, meanwhile, offered to help with the arrangements. At first, I thought they were genuinely trying to be supportive. My mom sent me articles about floral arrangements and the best colors for spring weddings, and my dad even mentioned pitching in financially. It all seemed harmless, until I realized their so-called help came with strings attached. We were thinking, my mom said one evening, it would be lovely if Vanessa had a special role in the wedding. Maybe she could give a speech during the reception? Or, even better, help you pick your dress. I hesitated, already feeling the trap closing in. I think we've got it under control, Mom. Mark and I have a pretty clear vision of what we want. Oh, but your sister has such great taste, she pressed. And she's been feeling a little left out lately. You know how hard things have been for her. There it was. The guilt trip. Vanessa's failures were, as always, being reframed as my responsibility to fix. I could already see where this was heading, and it made my stomach turn. But instead of arguing, I nodded and ended the call as quickly as I could. When I told Mark what had happened, he shook his head in disbelief. They're trying to make it about her, aren't they? They always do, I said bitterly. Mark squeezed my hand. This is our day, he said firmly. We'll handle them, whatever it takes. I wanted to believe him, but I had a sinking feeling my family wasn't done yet. Vanessa wasn't the type to let someone else take the spotlight, and my parents would always side with her. What I didn't know was just how far they were willing to go to make my wedding about Vanessa, and how much worse things were going to get. The call started innocently enough, as these things often do. My mom's overly cheerful tone was my first clue that something was off. She usually reserved that voice for moments when she wanted something, or was about to say something outrageous. "Sweetheart," she began, dragging out the word like it was supposed to soften whatever bomb she was about to drop. "Your father and I have been talking, and we have a wonderful idea." "What is it?" I asked, my guard already up. "Well, you know how Vanessa has always dreamed of walking down the aisles?" I froze. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. "Uh-huh," she continued, her tone syrupy sweet. "We thought, since she hasn't had the chance yet, maybe she could wear a wedding dress at your wedding." I blinked, convinced I'd misheard her. "What?" "Not during your ceremony, of course," she added quickly, as if that made it better. "Just, for a few photos. So she can have the experience. It's only fair, honey. She's had such a hard time lately, and this would mean so much to her." I sat in stunned silence, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "You want Vanessa to wear a wedding dress at my wedding?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes." "Isn't it a great idea?" she said, completely oblivious to, or maybe willfully ignoring, my growing anger. "No, it's not a great idea, Mom," I snapped. "It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard." Her tone shifted immediately, turning defensive. "There's no need to be so rude about it," she said sharply. "We're just trying to include her. Vanessa's been through so much, and this would mean the world to her. Don't you think you owe her that?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I don't owe her anything," I said firmly. "This is my wedding, not a charity event for Vanessa to live out some fantasy." My mom huffed, clearly not expecting me to push back. "You're being selfish," she said. "All I'm asking is for you to think about it. It's not a big deal. It's just a few photos." I hung up soon after, unable to stomach the conversation any longer. My blood was boiling. How could they think this was okay? When I told Mark what had happened, he burst out laughing. "Are they serious?" he asked, shaking his head in disbelief. "Oh, they're serious," I said, my voice dripping with anger. "This isn't just about her wearing a dress. This is about them trying to make my wedding about her." Mark's expression hardened. "We're not letting them hijack this. No way." Over the next few days, my mom's calls and texts came in waves, each more guilt-ridden than the last. She framed it as though Vanessa's happiness hinged on this one bizarre request. "You're going to have a beautiful day no matter what," she wrote in one message. "Can't you spare a moment to make your sister feel special too?" Vanessa, of course, didn't bother pretending to be subtle. "Mom said you're still thinking about my dress idea," she said smugly during a family Zoom call. "I've already got a few picked out if you want to see them." I gritted my teeth and ignored her, but the audacity was overwhelming. She wasn't just assuming I'd agree. She was acting like this was her event to co-opt. It became clear that they weren't going to let it go, so Mark and I came up with a plan. We would let them believe we were on board just long enough to catch them off guard. If they wanted to play games, we'd play too, but on our terms. Are you sure about this? Mark asked one night as we finalized our strategy. They've made my life hell for years, I said, my voice steely. It's time I take it back. What I didn't know is just how far my parents and Vanessa were willing to go, and how satisfying it would be to finally stand up to them. The days following that disastrous phone call were filled with a mix of frustration and determination. I stopped responding to my mom's texts, all of which were variations on the same theme. Vanessa is so excited. This will mean so much to her, and the particularly infuriating, you'll understand one day, when you're a parent. Mark and I tried to laugh about it to keep our sanity. Maybe we should rent her a bounce house and tell her the theme is princess for a day, he joked one evening as we went over seating charts. His humor was a welcome relief, but deep down, I couldn't shake my anger. This was supposed to be our day, a celebration of our love, and my parents were trying to hijack it to cater to Vanessa's insecurities. Then my dad called. Unlike my mom, he rarely involved himself in the drama. His approach was always more diplomatic, but that didn't make it any less infuriating. Hey, kiddo, he began, his tone casual. Your mom's been pretty upset. I thought I'd check in. I'm sure she is, I said dryly, already bracing myself. He sighed. Look, you know how your mother gets these ideas. She just wants everyone to feel included, especially Vanessa. She's been having a tough time, you know. I couldn't help it. I laughed bitterly. Tough time? Vanessa has been spoon-fed her whole life. She's not struggling. She's pouting because she's not the center of attention for once. That's not fair, he said, his tone sharper now. She's been through a lot. And what about me, Dad? I snapped. Do I not deserve to have one day that's just about me? This isn't about her. It's about me and Mark. If she wants to play dress up, she can do it on her own time. His silence spoke volumes. He wasn't used to me pushing back like this. After a long pause, he said, we just want to make sure she feels included. That's all. Included? I repeated, my voice rising. This isn't about inclusion. This is about control. Vanessa doesn't know how to let anyone else have the spotlight, and you're enabling her. He tried to backtrack, mumbling something about family and compromise, but I cut him off. I'm done talking about this. If you can't support me without making it about Vanessa, don't bother showing up. I hung up, my hands trembling with a mix of rage and adrenaline. Mark, who had been listening from across the room, came over and put his arms around me. That was the right thing to do, he said softly. But I wasn't so sure. I knew my parents wouldn't take this lying down. The next morning, Vanessa texted me. Mom told me you're overreacting. It's not that deep, sis. It's just a few photos. Don't be so selfish. Selfish. That word hit me harder than I expected. It had been the refrain of my childhood, the label slapped on me whenever I dared to assert myself. For a moment, I doubted myself. Was I being selfish? Should I just let Vanessa have her way to keep the peace? Mark must have sensed my hesitation because he sat me down that evening. They're trying to wear you down, he said. Don't let them. This is your wedding. You don't owe them anything. His words reignited the fire inside me. I realized then that I couldn't keep playing defense. If I wanted to protect my wedding day and my sanity, I needed to take control. That's when Mark and I started planning. We decided to let my parents and Vanessa think they were winning. I responded to my mom's next text with feigned enthusiasm. You're right, Mom. It's a great idea. Let's talk more at the rehearsal dinner. The response was immediate. I knew you'd come around, she wrote, followed by a string of heart emojis. Vanessa, predictably, jumped on board. Can't wait to see the look on everyone's faces, she texted, along with a picture of a wedding gown she was considering. Mark and I smiled at each other, a shared understanding passing between us. Let them think they've won, we agreed. By the time the wedding day rolled around, they'd learned just how wrong they were. Once Mark and I decided to fight back, we knew we had to be strategic. My parents and Vanessa were masters of manipulation, but their biggest weakness was their overconfidence. They were so used to controlling every situation that they wouldn't see us coming. First, we hired extra security for the wedding. The venue staff already included a few people to keep things running smoothly, but Mark insisted we needed someone specifically to deal with Vanessa and my parents. We contacted a local security company and laid everything out for them. The instructions were clear. Vanessa and my parents were not allowed inside the venue unless I explicitly gave the go-ahead. We also informed a few trusted friends and members of Mark's family about the situation. They promised to be on alert in case Vanessa or my parents tried to cause a scene. "Consider us your wedding bouncers," Mark's brother joked, but I knew he meant it. Having that support gave me a sense of calm I hadn't felt in weeks. The key to our plan, though, was keeping my parents and Vanessa in the dark. We played along with their ridiculous scheme, feeding them just enough information to keep them convinced they were in control. During one phone call, my mom brought up Vanessa's dress again. "She's so excited," she said. This will really be a moment for the whole family to come together." I forced a smile I hoped she could hear over the phone. "Of course, Mom. I've been thinking about it, and I think it's a great idea. Let's finalize everything at the rehearsal dinner." There was a pause, and then she practically squealed with delight. "I knew you'd come around. Vanessa will be so happy." Vanessa texted me not long after. "Mom said you're finally on board." "About time, sis. Can't wait to see everyone's reaction when they see us both looking amazing." I showed the text to Mark, who snorted in disbelief. "She really thinks this is going to be her day, doesn't she?" "Let her think that," I replied. "The bigger her expectations, the harder she's going to crash when reality hits." At the rehearsal dinner, my parents and Vanessa arrived dressed to the nines, as if it were already the wedding day. My mom was beaming, and Vanessa strutted in wearing a white cocktail dress that was just a little too bridal to be coincidental. "This is going to be amazing," Vanessa gushed, ignoring the tense look on my face. I can already picture the photos. "Mom, don't forget to get a shot of me with the train when I walk down the aisle." I clenched my teeth, but kept my tone neutral. "Let's just get through the rehearsal first, okay?" Behind the scenes, Mark and I finalized the last pieces of our plan with the venue staff and security team. We gave them a photo of Vanessa in her dress, along with clear instructions. If she tries to walk in wearing anything even close to white, she doesn't get through the doors. By the end of the evening, my parents were smugly satisfied, convinced they had me under their thumb. Vanessa, in particular, couldn't stop talking about how iconic the day was going to be. As they left the rehearsal dinner, my mom patted my hand and said, "You're such a good sister for doing this for Vanessa. It's going to mean so much to her." I smiled sweetly and replied, "Anything for family." Mark had to hold back a laugh as they walked out. "They're going to lose it tomorrow," he said. "Good," I replied. "It's about time." That night, as we went over the plan one final time, I felt a strange mix of nerves and excitement. For years, I'd been the one bending, compromising, and making sacrifices to keep the peace. Tomorrow, that would finally change. Mark kissed my forehead and said, "No matter what happens, we're going to have an incredible day." He was right. Tomorrow wasn't just about getting married, it was about reclaiming my life. The morning of the wedding was a dream. The sun poured through the windows of the bridal suite as I got ready with my closest friends. My dress fit perfectly, the flowers were vibrant, and everything was on schedule. For the first time in weeks, I felt like this day was truly going to be about Mark and me. As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my veil, one of my bridesmaids walked in with a mischievous grin. "You look amazing," she said. "And don't worry, we've got everything under control." I smiled back, knowing exactly what she meant. Mark and I had left nothing to chance. Security was already stationed at the entrance. Our friends were ready to run interference, and we had a team of people dedicated to making sure Vanessa and my parents couldn't hijack the day. Still, there was a part of me bracing for the storm. It didn't take long for it to arrive. About an hour before the ceremony, one of the security guards radioed in, "We've got a situation at the main gate." I glanced at my bridesmaids, who exchanged knowing looks. "Let's see how this plays out," I said, trying to stay calm. From my spot in the suite, I couldn't see the confrontation directly, but I could hear it, Vanessa's shrill voice cutting through the quiet elegance of the venue. "What do you mean, not on the list?" she demanded. "I'm the bride's sisters." "I'm sorry, ma'am," one of the guards said, his tone calm but firm. "We have specific instructions from the bride. You're not permitted to enter wearing that dress." Vanessa's voice rose several octaves. "This is ridiculous. I have every right to be here. Do you know who I am?" By then, my mom had joined in. "She's family," she said indignantly. "You can't treat us like this. We're the bride's parents." The commotion was loud enough that a few of the guests started to notice. Mark stepped in, looking completely composed, and walked toward the gate. I watched through a side window as he addressed them directly. "This is our wedding day," he said, his voice steady, but with an edge of steel. If you can't respect that, you're not welcome here. Vanessa gaped at him, her face a mask of disbelief. She was wearing a full-blown white wedding gown, complete with a veil and a train. It was so over the top it would have been laughable if it wasn't so infuriating. This isn't about respect, she snapped. This is about you two trying to humiliate me. Mom, are you just going to stand there and let them treat us like this? My dad, looking uncomfortable, tried to mediate. Maybe we can all just talk this through, he said weakly. There's nothing to talk about, Mark replied firmly. We were clear about our boundaries, and you've chosen to ignore them. He turned to the guards. Please escort them off the property. Vanessa lost it. You can't do this, she shrieked. You're ruining everything. But the guards didn't budge. They politely but firmly guided Vanessa and my parents away from the entrance. My mom shouted something about how I was tearing the family apart, but her words barely registered. Back inside the suite, one of my bridesmaids hugged me. You're handling this like a pro, she said. They're just making themselves look ridiculous. I nodded, though my hands were trembling slightly. The confrontation had been stressful, but I felt an overwhelming sense of relief knowing they couldn't ruin the day any further. The ceremony itself was everything I'd dreamed of. As I walked down the aisle, the tension from earlier melted away. Mark stood at the altar, his expression filled with love and pride. The vows we exchanged were heartfelt and genuine, and for those precious moments, nothing else mattered. At the reception, the incident at the gate became the talk of the evening. Guests who had witnessed the drama couldn't stop shaking their heads in disbelief. Did she really show up in a wedding dress? One of Mark's aunts asked, her voice filled with equal parts horror and amusement. She did, I confirmed with a small smile. But thankfully, security handled it. By the end of the night, I felt a sense of triumph I hadn't expected. Vanessa and my parents had tried to steal the spotlight, but they'd only embarrassed themselves in the process. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to them and won. Still, as Mark and I danced under the soft glow of the string lights, I couldn't help but wonder, would this truly be the end of their meddling, or just the beginning of a new battle? If there was one thing my family excelled at, it was making themselves the victims in any situation. The very next day, the aftermath of the wedding began to unfold, and it was as messy as I'd expected. My mom was the first to strike, taking to social media to air her grievances. Heartbroken that our daughter chose to push us away on what should have been the happiest day of her life, she wrote, her words carefully crafted to sound mournful rather than accusatory. Family is supposed to come together during these moments, not tear each other apart. We tried our best to make it special for her, but some people just can't appreciate love and support. Her friends and acquaintances, most of whom didn't know the full story, flooded the comments with sympathy. So sorry to hear this, one person wrote. You've always been such a loving mother. Then Vanessa chimed in with her own post. Hers was far less subtle. She included a photo of herself in the infamous white dress, along with the caption, all I wanted was to share a moment with my sister, but instead, I was humiliated and treated like an outcast. Some people just don't understand the meaning of family. The comments on her post were even more outrageous. You look stunning, one person wrote. Your sister should have been honored to include you. Another added, sounds like jealousy to me. Don't let her get you down, Vanessa. When I first saw the posts, I felt a mix of anger and exhaustion. Of course, they're twisting the narrative, I said to Mark, showing him the screenshots. He shook his head unfazed. Let them talk, he said. Anyone who knows you will see through it. He was right, of course. My closest friends and Mark's family rallied around us, sending messages of support and even laughing at how absurd the situation had become. She really posted herself in a wedding dress and thought people would side with her, one friend texted, followed by a string of laughing emojis.
But not everyone saw it that way.
A few extended family members reached out, clearly torn between what they'd witnessed and the version of events my parents and Vanessa were pushing. I heard there was some drama at the wedding, one aunt said in a carefully worded email. I just hope you and your parents can work through it. Family is so important, especially now that you're starting a new chapter in your life. The most surprising reaction came from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. I saw Vanessa's post, she wrote. Honestly, it just reminded me of all the times your parents let her walk all over you when we were kids. Good for you for standing up to them. It's about time. That message gave me a small sense of validation. For years, I'd thought no one outside my immediate family understood what I'd been through. But now, people were starting to see the truth. Still, the backlash took a toll. My mom left me several voicemails, each more dramatic than the last. "I can't believe you did this to us," she sobbed in one. "Your father and I are devastated. How could you humiliate Vanessa like that? She was just trying to be part of your day." Vanessa, unsurprisingly, didn't bother with subtlety. She texted me directly, "You're a selfish, ungrateful brat. I hope you're happy now. You ruined everything." Mark insisted I block them both, but I hesitated. Cutting them off completely felt final in a way I wasn't sure I was ready for. Instead, I let their messages sit unread, a quiet act of defiance that gave me some small sense of control. Despite the chaos, the memory of our wedding day remained untarnished. For the first time, I felt like I'd taken back a piece of my life that Vanessa and my parents had tried to claim for themselves. I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. But the fallout wasn't over. My parents and Vanessa weren't the type to let go easily, and I knew this was just the beginning of their campaign to win back control, or at least, to paint me as the villain in their story. The question now was how far they'd be willing to go, and how much I was willing to endure to keep them out of my life. In the weeks following the wedding, the tension escalated to a new level. My parents' attempts to contact me bordered on obsessive. My phone buzzed constantly with texts, voicemails, and even emails from my mom and dad. Most messages followed the same script, pleas for reconciliation that were thinly veiled guilt trips. "We're your parents," one voicemail from my mom began, her tone trembling with faux sadness. "I don't know why you've chosen to shut us out like this, but family should stick together. You're hurting us, sweetheart. Can't we just talk?" My dad, as usual, played the role of the reasonable one, sending long-winded emails about compromising and moving forward. One email read, "I understand emotions ran high at the wedding, but there's no need for this cold silence. Let's find a way to make things right for everyone." I ignored them all. I wasn't ready to open the door to that level of toxicity again, especially after their stunt on my wedding day. When I didn't respond, they turned their focus to Mark. At first, the messages were polite enough, appealing to a sense of family unity. "Mark," one text from my mom read, "We know you're a good man. Please help us fix things with my name. We all want what's best for her." But when Mark ignored them too, their tone shifted. My mom accused him of turning me against them, while my dad implied he was being manipulative. Mark read me one particularly nasty message before blocking them completely. "They're grasping at straws," he said, shaking his head. "It's not worth engaging with this." Meanwhile, Vanessa was on a warpath. She doubled down on her victim narrative, taking to Facebook with an elaborate post about how I'd ruined her life and destroyed the family dynamic. She wrote about how much she'd sacrificed for me as a sister and how I'd repaid her by humiliating her in front of everyone. The post was dripping with melodrama, complete with vague phrases like, "You never know how much someone's jealousy can poison a family, and sometimes people hurt you the most when they're supposed to love you the most." She even attached a photo of herself in the white dress she'd worn to the wedding, as if to drive home the point that she was the real victim. I braced myself for the fallout, expecting the extended family to rally behind her like they always had. But to my surprise, the narrative didn't go as planned. A few family members reached out to me privately, asking for my side of the story. Once I explained what had actually happened, how Vanessa had tried to hijack my wedding and how my parents had enabled her behavior, most of them were horrified. "Are you serious?" one cousin texted. "She actually wore a wedding dress to your wedding? That's unhinged." Another cousin, who had always been more observant than most, admitted, "Honestly, I'm not surprised. Vanessa's always been a bit much. Good for you for standing up for yourself." The tide began to turn. For the first time in my life, Vanessa and my parents were facing real consequences for their actions. Relatives who had once blindly defended them started to distance themselves, disgusted by their behavior. Vanessa's Facebook post backfired spectacularly. While a handful of her friends chimed in with sympathy, the extended family wasn't buying it. Comments started appearing that called her out directly. "This is ridiculous, Vanessa. It was her wedding, not yours. You're seriously upset she didn't let you wear a wedding dress to her ceremony? Get a grip. You've always been the center of attention. Let her have this one thing." Vanessa eventually deleted the post, but the damage was done. Her victim narrative had crumbled, and my parents' reputation wasn't faring much better. For the first time, I felt a small sense of justice. It didn't erase the years of mistreatment, but it was satisfying to see my family's behavior laid bare for everyone to see. They couldn't hide behind excuses or manipulate people into taking their side anymore. Still, the victory was bittersweet. Cutting off my family had brought me peace, but it also left a void I wasn't sure how to fill. Mark and I were building a new life together, surrounded by friends and chosen family, but there was a lingering sadness for what could have been if my family had been different. The messages from my parents eventually slowed, but never stopped entirely. Every so often, I'd get an email or voicemail that dredged up old feelings of guilt. But each time, I reminded myself why I'd made the decision to cut them out. This was my life now, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me again. It's been months since the wedding, but the ripple effects still linger. My parents and Vanessa have gone silent in a way that isn't truly silent. Occasional emails from my mom pop up in my inbox, their subject lines always designed to tug at my guilt. "We miss you, sweetheart. Family is forever. Won't you reconsider?" I don't open them anymore.
I don't need to.
I know exactly what they'll say. The same recycled pleas and passive-aggressive guilt trips wrapped in a thin veneer of love. Cutting them off has brought me peace, but there's always that gnawing question. Will they ever really stop? Mark has been my rock through all of it. We've thrown ourselves into building a life together, a life that feels like a quiet rebellion against everything my family ever taught me about relationships. Our home is filled with warmth, laughter, and respect. It's the kind of love I used to envy in others but never believed I could have for myself. Still, there's a part of me that struggles to let go entirely. Sometimes late at night, I catch myself wondering what my parents and Vanessa are saying about me now. Are they plotting some new way to wedge themselves back into my life? Are they spinning more lies to the extended family? Or, worse, are they waiting for a moment of weakness, a crack in my resolve, to swoop back in? Mark notices when those thoughts creep in. "Hey," he says softly, pulling me out of my spiral. "We're okay. You're okay?" I nod, letting his words ground me. He's right, of course. I've come so far, and I refuse to let their toxicity define me anymore. But the fear is still there, lurking in the background. Vanessa, especially, is the type to hold a grudge. She's not someone who forgives or forgets, and I know better than to assume she's let this go. A few weeks ago, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Vanessa was still telling people I've betrayed the family and humiliated her in public. Apparently, she's convinced that one day I'll realize the error of my ways and come crawling back. The idea makes me laugh, but it also unsettles me. Vanessa and my parents have always thrived on control, and the thought of them finding new ways to manipulate or hurt me is one I can't completely shake. For now, though, I'm choosing to focus on what I can control, my own happiness. Mark and I are planning a small getaway, a delayed honeymoon of sorts, and I'm excited to finally take a step back from all the noise. As I sit here writing this, Oliver, our rescue dog, is snoring softly at my feet. The sunlight streams through the windows, and Mark is in the kitchen, humming as he makes coffee. It's a small moment, but it feels monumental. This is my life now. A life I built, a life I chose. The past may still haunt me, and I may never be entirely free of Vanessa and my parents' influence. But I'm learning that it's okay to carry those scars. They don't define me. For the first time, I feel like I'm the one in control of my story. That's a victory no one can take from me, no matter what comes next.